Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're tackling a topic that's generating a lot of buzz these days, and honestly, when I first heard about it, I was like, whoa, we gotta look into this.
I know, right? It's pretty fascinating.
We're talking about the Rose sex toy,
Ah, yes, the ruse.
and more specifically, how it seems to be impacting relationships. We're basing this deep dive on a really interesting episode of the Lost Tapes podcast.
Yeah, that was a great episode.
It was. It featured interviews with a bunch of different guys, all talking about their experiences with the Rose, and
I think what makes it so compelling is that it's not just about a product. It's like a window into how couples are navigating intimacy these days.
exactly. And what really caught our attention is how many of these men are saying the Rose is actually leading to like happier relationships.
Makes sense if everyone is having more fun well.
Yeah, and a lot of them are saying it even helps ease the pressure on them.
That's an interesting angle.
Yeah, it is. So we're going to break down all of these claims and try to see what's really going on.
Definitely. I'm really curious to unpack this and see if there's any scientific basis for these claims.
All right, so let's jump in. One of the guys who really stood out to me was Daniel. He's 34.
Okay.
And he talked about how before the Rose, things could be a bit of a struggle in the bedroom, especially after long days at work.
I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah, totally. But he said with the Rose, his partner is now satisfied without him having to put in as much effort. And he doesn't feel that pressure to perform anymore.
So it sounds like it's taking some of the pressure off him, which is a good thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then there was Marco, who's 29. He was actually pretty skeptical at first.
A lot of people are when they first hear about it.
Yeah, but then his girlfriend tried it, and, well, his words were, she was over the moon. She even called it like a shortcut to ecstasy.
Whoa, okay, that's a pretty bold statement.
It is, right? But Marco noticed a real difference in her and their relationship overall. Like, she was just happier and more content.
Interesting. So even though he was initially skeptical, he saw these positive changes in his partner firsthand.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's Chris, who's 42. He mentioned how the Rose has actually brought him and his partner closer together.
Now that's interesting. How so?
He said he can still be part of her pleasure without getting exhausted, which I'm sure is a relief for a lot of guys.
Yeah, I can see that.
And he finds it really fulfilling to see her enjoying herself. Like, it's created a new level of intimacy for them.
So it's not just about him performing, it's about them sharing the pleasure and connecting on a deeper level.
Yeah, and that's a theme we heard from a lot of these guys, actually. This sense of increased confidence and connection because of the Rose. It's not just about the physical pleasure itself, it's about how that pleasure translates into a more positive dynamic between them.
So the question is this just a novelty effect? Or is there something more profound happening here?
Right, like, is this just a fad? Or are we seeing a real shift in how couples approach intimacy?
And to really understand that, I think we need to first understand what the Rose is and how it supposedly works.
Okay, so based on what we've gathered from the Lost Tapes and some other articles we've read, the Rose has this unique shape, and it uses air pulsing technology to target specific areas for stimulation. And apparently this is supposed to mimic certain sensations in a way that traditional toys just can't.
Air pulsing, huh? That's interesting. I wonder if that's the key to why so many women are reporting such intense and quick results. We definitely need to dive into the science behind this a bit later.
Totally. But for now, let's stick with the mechanics of it. So the Rose is designed to maximize stimulation and efficiency, which makes sense given what the guys are saying about their partners experiencing pleasure so quickly.
Okay, yeah, so mechanically it seems pretty straightforward. But what about the science? Does it actually support these claims? That's where things get a little more complex. From what I've read, the Rose seems to be designed to specifically stimulate certain types of nerve endings.
Okay.
And these nerve endings are highly concentrated in, those areas.
Yeah, makes sense.
So that could explain why it's so effective for a lot of women. Now, air pulsing as opposed to vibration, that's another interesting aspect.
Yeah, why is that?
Well, it creates a more gentle, kind of wave-like sensation.
Yeah.
It's not as jarring as vibration.
So it's more about like a gradual buildup of pleasure.
Exactly. It's like the difference between a gentle breeze and a jackhammer,
I like that analogy. But it's not just about the physical sensations, right? A lot of these guys also talked about unexpected benefits, like increased confidence and feeling more connected to their partners.
Right. And that's where the psychological and emotional impact of pleasure comes in.
Yeah.
When both partners are feeling satisfied, it can create this positive feedback loop.
Oh, I see.
Increased pleasure leads to increased confidence and a sense of closeness, And that can translate into greater relationship satisfaction overall.
So it's almost like the rose is giving couples a new way to explore intimacy and pleasure without all the pressure and expectations that often come with, traditional approaches.
Exactly. It's about creating a space for mutual enjoyment and exploration. And that can be incredibly powerful for a relationship.
So this brings us back to the idea of the rose being a game changer. Is that just hype, or is there actually evidence of a broader shift in how couples approach intimacy?
I think there's definitely something to that. We're seeing a growing emphasis on sexual wellness and open communication in relationships these days.
Right.
And the rose, in a way, could be seen as a tool that facilitates both of those things.
One of the guys, Ethan, who's 31, talked about how his partner is now more satisfied in like minutes than they used to be after spending a lot of time, trying.
Yeah. It sounds like it's taking away some of the stress and frustration that can sometimes come with intimacy.
Exactly. And several of the men also talked about how fulfilling it was to see their partners so satisfied. Like it takes the focus away from their own performance and allows them to just be present and connect with their partner on a deeper level.
That speaks to a level of comfort and openness within their relationships. There was one guy, Aaron, he's 36. He mentioned that his partner also uses the rose solo.
Oh, wow.
And he said it makes him feel good knowing that she's always satisfied whether they're together or not. It's about her pleasure and her agency.
It's like it's shifting the dynamic in a way that feels more balanced and fulfilling for both of them.
I think that's a key point. It's not about one person being responsible for the other person's pleasure. It's about creating a shared experience where both partners feel empowered and fulfilled.
Because we've talked a lot about the potential benefits, but are there any downsides or challenges that couples might face when incorporating something like the rose into their relationship?
That's a good question. And it's important to remember that every couple is different. What works for one might not work for another. Open communication and a willingness to experiment are key, as with any new element you introduce into a relationship.
So it's not a magic solution, but rather a tool that can help couples explore and enhance what's already there.
Precisely. And it's worth noting that the rose, while gaining popularity, is just one example of a broader trend in sexual wellness and technology. We're seeing more and more innovations aimed at helping people connect with their bodies and explore pleasure in new ways.
So it's not just about this one product, but about a larger cultural shift towards embracing pleasure and prioritizing sexual well-being.
Exactly. And that's a positive development, in my opinion. When we feel good in our bodies and confident in our intimate lives, it can have a positive ripple effect on all areas of our lives, including our relationships.
It makes you wonder if this is just the beginning. If increased pleasure and ease can lead to stronger relationships, what other innovations might we see in the future? What other tools and approaches might help us deepen our connections and experience intimacy in new and fulfilling ways? It's pretty amazing to think about all the possibilities, isn't it?
It is. And, even though the rose is just one specific example, it really does seem to represent like a broader shift.
In how we think about intimacy.
Exactly. A shift in how we think about it and experience it. Like it's giving us permission to
prioritize pleasure.
Yeah, and to explore our desires more openly and without shame.
And that can have like a ripple effect, right?
Absolutely. Not just on our individual well-being,
but on our relationships too.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the rose, what would you say is the most important thing for our listeners to take away from all of this?
That's a good question. I think the key takeaway is that intimacy, it's a journey, not a destination. It's about continuous exploration, communication, and, being open to new possibilities. The rose is just one tool, but it represents this really interesting shift towards prioritizing pleasure and connection.
And that's definitely something worth celebrating.
Absolutely.
Well said. And for our listeners out there, we encourage you to keep exploring, whether it's through open conversations with your partner, trying something new, or simply giving yourself permission to, prioritize your own pleasure. There's a whole world of intimacy out there waiting to be discovered. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring.
Dive into the shadows of human nature with the Lost Tapes podcast, where the truths hidden beneath our daily lives are brought to light. We uncover the layers of complex relationships, hidden emotions, and raw realities, from mental health to life's hardest truths. No topic is off limits, no story too raw. The Lost Tapes podcast is your invitation to understand the unspoken facets of life. Join us and let's explore life's hidden sides, one story at a time. Don't miss out on more hidden truths. Subscribe now to the Lost Tapes podcast. Stay curious. Stay informed. Click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to never miss an episode.